Aloha mai kako. Welcome to the American Association of Geographers webinar series in preparation for its annual conference to be held in Honolulu in April of 2024. My name is Neil Hannes, and I'm founder and CEO of Ho'okele Strategies. Ho'okele is the Hawaiian word for wayfinding. And I'm pleased to have been retained by AAG to coordinate engagement of themes, talents, sites, and other opportunities that will create connection with the worldview of Hawaii's indigenous culture and our AAG participants in the conference. I founded my consulting firm after a long career with the Kamehameha Schools, which was blessed with the endowment of lands that came from Hawaiian royalty. And we managed a team that managed 360,000 acres of Hawaii land to achieve an optimal balance of cultural, educational, economic, environmental, and community benefits. Took an amazing team of staff and community partners to do that work and fulfill this challenge. And I'm really pleased that many of those talented individuals have answered my call to participate in this webinar series and to the benefit of the American Association of Geographers. And we have three here today who are very, very capable and leaders of our community. So we want to take, you know me, and my role will be to serve in this webinar series as a host or moderator. That's a pleasant task generally. The unfortunate part is I may have to interrupt our panelists and move on to another subject for the sake of time, and in some cases even not get to questions that our audience really wants to answer. And I'm told by AAG that, again, since this is part of a series, we will pay attention to those questions, even if they're not directly addressed in this webinar, and perhaps put a call out for proposals for a future webinar so that people's questions are answered. So let me proceed now by just having our other panelists introduce themselves. And we are totally unrehearsed in this in terms of order, but I'm going to default to alphabetical order by first name. So Aurora Kagawa Viviani, an AAG member. I think it's very fitting we start with you.
Thanks, Neil. I would like to, I guess, first caveat that I am an AAG member, but I'm admittedly quite a new one, and I've never attended a big AAG meeting. My professional society is usually American Geophysical Union, but I'm excited to be a member of AAG because I see just the vibrance of the community as something that's valuable for students. So I am a new faculty at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in Geography and Environment and at the Water Resources Research Center. I also identify as a mom of two small kids. I'm of Honolulu. I grew up about 10 minutes away from the university as a city dweller. Yeah, I'm just honored to be part of this conversation and its initiation and its continuance in the run-up to the meeting.
Mahalo. We appreciate that. Gary?
Hey, everybody. My name is Gary Langham. I'm the executive director at the AAG, and I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area, and I've been in this role for almost 4 years now. I'm a trained ecologist, and I'm really honored to be here with you all.
Thank you, Gary. Mahina Paishan Duart.
Belina Meki Aloha. Warm greetings to all of you, and thank you again to AAG for the invitation to participate, and particularly to a mentor and beloved Neil Hannes. Mahina Paishan Duart. The lands that nourish and feed me are many, but most particularly is He'eia and He'eia Fish Pond. Also on the deck of a voyaging canoe, Makali'i, and her mama canoe, Hokule'a. I'm very comfortable in the deep dark ocean of Moananui-a-Kea. I've also been raised in the valleys of Paoa as well. And so again, I bring these lands, and it's abundant to this conversation. And also it's the stark realities of the pressures, the increasing pressures of overuse. I hope to bring I hope to bring some spice to our conversation this morning. And then lastly, I too am a mother of two and proud granddaughter of Emma Halemanu, of Annie Kaluhia Lulu Poi Poi, of Caesar Paishan, and Gabriel Garduki. Thank you again for inviting us to exchange with all of you.
Mahina, could you add a little bit further? You were involved with the ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures Group as a co-founder, and are you still a member of the board of the Hawaii Tourism Authority?
Yes, all of those things. Ulalia Woodsidely and I are part of a founding group, ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures, and she and I will likely share a little bit more of that initiative. It was born out of COVID, and basically were frustrated as Kanaka Maoli in our own ancestral homeland that there was a lot of discussion around the reset and the reboot of an economy, but we felt left out. We felt like people like us and marginalized people of Hawaii were being left out of the conversation. So we decided to create our own table and invite everyone to the table to envision what is our responsibility first to our ʻāina, our beloved homeland, and to one another, and what do we do to not go back to the extractive economy that has hurt many of us. And yes, I serve on the Hawaii Tourism Authority. I'm just completing 1 year, and we're a state volunteer board that's charged with overseeing 2 functions. Primarily, it's the marketing and branding of Hawaii. Feels a little like, what about that? And then number 2, it's we're also responsible for the stewardship, so destination stewardship, and to manage over tourism, impacts to our ʻāina and to our communities, and particularly to our quality of life.
I appreciate you adding that. Since a big conference like this is in fact 6,000 tourists, I thought it was important to have you here and really wearing that with that perspective in mind. And I didn't cite, Aurora, I can't remember if you said in your introduction that Aurora and I are on the State Commission, Hawaii Commission on Water Resource Management. So she has a very important policy advocacy position there on behalf of the water quality of our surface and groundwater systems of Hawaii. We now go to Rebecca. Aloha.
Hello, so I'm Rebecca Wave, and I'm the president of the American Association of Geographers. I grew up in the chaparral of the San Joaquin Hills in southern Orange County and the ephemeral streams of San Diego Creek's watershed. And they shaped my understanding and abiding love of freshwater ecosystems as fascinating and rare and sometimes astonishingly powerful. I'm the child of settlers who came to the US from Russia and Romania, as well as Netherlands and Ireland. I am now in Bloomington, Indiana, in the US Midwest, adjusting to water abundance and the idea that it may rain at any season. And I live here amongst the limestone hills and the White River watershed, and I am directly involved in care for my mother who lives here and also for my daughter. And I am very, very pleased to be here at this webinar, and thank you all for your time.
Neil, you're on mute.
Thank you. So I was telling her, Rebecca, that I think we got most of that, but you might want to be careful where your mic is positioned. And in my case, I might want to be careful that I take my mute button off. So I'll give myself advice. Finally, we have Ulalia Woodside Lee.
Mahalo, Neil. That's why I was waiting and listening for you. So, I think I'm up next. Aloha mai kako, everyone. I'm probably going to be the one that's sharing my screen the most, and also using a lot of Hawaiian words along today. I think it's important to see faces. It's important to see images of place. It's important to hear the language of the place where where we're going to visit and have a relationship with. So aloha mai kākou, mai Hawaii nui kuauli, ahiki ka mole olu o lehua, velina me ke aloha. Greetings to us all, kākou, all of us together, that we make this thing as a collective, since we've joined here together. Mai Hawaii nui kuauli, from Hawaii, the big green back mountains, ahiki ka mole olu o lehua, to where the sun sets, that taproot at Lehua Island. Greetings to us all. Geographers, I want to give you a little geographic perspective from a Hawaiian context. I'm a product of these islands. It's native peoples, my ancestors, my teachers, and my mentors. Experience and research with these fine folks, some represented here in these images. They wear the mantle of kuleana, of responsibility and privilege, of konohiki, of having the responsibility for particular place and resource and people management, of kumu, teachers, kia'i, those that have stood as guardians, they've shaped me. O ka mea mai ka'i e malama, o ka mea mai ka'i ole e kapai. Those things that I share today that have taught to me, if they have purpose and they are good to keep, please keep those things. The things that I share that maybe don't have purpose right now or are unclear, just set those aside. What I share is really taught by those that came before. Anything that's great is influenced and inspired by them. Any mistakes or misstatements are mine alone. And it is this ancestral wisdom that thrives and evolves in our dynamic lahui. It's relevant and it's current, and it's through this adaptation that we prosper in our homeland. I'll just share. So my great grandmother up there on the left side here, she was a fierce kia'i, a fierce guardian of water to ensure she could continue to grow her staple crop when the evolution of sugar plantation came here. My parents taught me love of this land and its culture, and I've had great teachers. Neil has been a part of this slide, not just for today. Last thing that I'll share is rank and serial number. I'm currently the executive director of the Nature Conservancy's Hawaii and Palmyra program, and I've had the privilege to serve with Neil, Aurora, and Mahina in many different capacities in our community, and I look forward to our dialogue today.
Mahalo nui, Ulalia. Movers and shakers, one and all. So it's a great group to have as part of this conversation. And I thank you for taking time out of your days, very busy days, to do this. So the AAG membership will be coming into place. They were entering space. And we have protocols for that surround that reflect an understanding and a worldview about that's really needs to be done with a sense of intention and not just random sense of privilege that may be different from how people view things in other places. And to start that conversation, I'm going to want to go back to Ulalia and then invite Mahina and Aurora to pick up on the conversation as you wish. Tell us about these protocols and why they're important, and you know, what do we intend by them? Are they meant to be off-putting, a kind of a barrier or a guard, or what? Help explain this to our membership.
I'm going to jump in here and start in one place, and I hope that with Mahina and Aurora, we'll take this in all sorts of different places about this host and guest relationship. And I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to use some Hawaiian words again. So I'm going to start first just by sharing this. I welcome you to read along with me and listen to these words, and I'll talk a little bit about what this is in a moment. Kuni kamauna I kalai o wai ale la I wailu wai. Ukia elai kalani ka papa awai o ka waikini. Alai ia elai no nalo kaipuha kalaula mauko ka pae. Mai pai ka leo. He ole ka he mai e. So we can see the translation here. We're talking about place, a geography where we have the tall, steep mountain stands, gives us the names of those places, how it stands close to the heavens there. We give a sense of a stream that comes across and a water source up there in this area. Our view is kind of clouded by another prominent mountain space that's there. We can't see all of this place, this great upland there. But what we learn is that we're sharing our voice, we're giving our voice, we're calling out to this place, and we're waiting for an answer. We're hoping that there will be an answer. We're hoping that there will be a reply. This is a very common practice and tradition in our islands for entering space. This is one type of practice that sort of, it's a traditional practice that comes through time, but it grounds us in our relationship to space. What you see here is the asking of permission to enter. And in this particular chant, it talks a little bit about the journey has been long and heavy, it's steep. I can't see all of the things that are laid out in front of me, but I come with my voice, I come with an offering, I come recognizing that I am entering into another space, that I come with that respect for this place, and I come with this offering of my voice. And so this is one aspect of coming into place that is common for us. And even for people who are not familiar with the Hawaiian language, or who don't, who this chanting, doing this oli practice is not familiar, we'll find people in Hawaii will come to a place and they'll pause and they'll verbalize their intention. Intention is important. As we gather in these places, as we enter, we stop and pause and think about what is our intention? And then importantly, what is our function? When we enter into place, we also have function. And we recognize, and there are many other, we'll share, well, I'm gonna pass the baton in a moment. We have different ways in which we speak about the host and guest relationship, and recognizing that there is a function in both of those relationships. And together, we need to uphold and help each other carry forward our responsibilities in this relationship. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to open space for others to chime in.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Mahina, I'm sure you have concepts or thoughts to add.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to read from this book, just a short excerpt. Change we must, to build upon what Lilia just clearly articulated, intention and function. I'm going to add another layer to that. So if you wish, close your eyes. I'm just going to read an excerpt again. Let's see. I grew up in Palama, near downtown Honolulu on the island of Oahu. Throughout my childhood, the influence of my grandparents was strong. They were like the older Hawaiians of their day, extremely dignified and spiritually aware. My grandfather was a fisherman and a kahuna kalaiwa'a, a canoe builder. He and my grandmother lived at the entrance to Pearl Harbor in a fishing village called Pu'uloa. One day while I was there, children of the village who had been playing in front of the house called out to my grandmother, "E kupuna, he malihini keia e ho ea maila." Grandmother, there is a stranger coming. My grandmother responded, "Ke hiki mai ka malihini, kahea mai ia'u." When he arrived, call me. When he arrived, the children called, "E kupuna ua ho ea maila." He has arrived. My grandmother came, stood on the lanai, and said to the stranger, "E komo mai, kipa mai e pa'ina. Come in and dine." While they were eating, I sat on the floor of the lanai to eavesdrop. When he was through eating, the visitor thanked my grandmother. She came forward with a little puniu, a coconut dish with salt in it. She extended her hand, and he picked up 3 lumps of salt, put them in his mouth, and went off. When the stranger left, I asked my grandmother if she knew him. "A'ole," she said, "he malihini ho'i." No, he was a malihini, a visitor, a foreigner. When I asked her why she fed him, she got very angry and ordered me to sit on the floor in front of her and said, "I want you to remember these words for as long as you live and never forget them. A ole au I hana aku nei ke kanaka. A ka hana aku nei au I ka uhane a ke akua I loko ana. I was not feeding the man. I was entertaining the spirit of the divine within him. I was 6 years old when this happened. I have never forgotten my grandmother's words. This practice of honoring the other was so much a part of the culture that it needed no name. Today we call it Aloha, or the Aloha spirit. But to the Hawaiians of old, it was inherent and natural. They lived it. To feed a stranger passing by, that is pure Aloha. Today we have to be taught it because we're so far removed from our culture. So just to build on that shortly and then pass it over. Dr. Pulani Kanahele also describes Aloha as this. It is it's a constant reciprocation, right? So as we inhale and exhale, we offer our breath, right? We offer our carbon dioxide. And there's an intake, and we are part of this water system. And so really, you know, the ancestral consciousness or the island-based consciousness, as she describes, is a lifestyle, an economy, a life way that is grounded and centered around reciprocity. So when you ask what is the kuleana of a host, of a guest, it is aloha. And it's not just the glossed over branded image of aloha. Perhaps you're able to take maybe some of the deeper meanings from that short excerpt that I read this morning. Mahalo.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much, Mahina. Aurora, do you have additional concepts or thoughts to add, especially as we think about in the field of geography that your colleagues that you work with or your academic colleagues? How are we taking, as explorers and investigators of place, how do you take the worldview and really enact it or have it be a part of your field?
A minute to think about that. I think, again, I'll just say I'm a physical geographer and we're like maybe a minority within the geographer community. But in general, a lot of geographers engage in deep introspection on the complicity of geography in conquest and empire. And so there's a struggle in my observations to envision how geography can be different while we have historically been part of the renaming of places, the erasure of histories, and the breaking of that reciprocity. Because it's influenced by its roots, I think in a Euro-American worldview that doesn't think about that cycling or that relational engagement. And so I really appreciate this conversation for centering it. And if we are going to be in Hawaii, engaging that reciprocity and understanding, okay, it is this sort of back and forth. There's maybe kuleana for the host in Pu'uloa to feed the spirit of the malihini, but also there's this other side of responsibility that the malihini now has obligation to feed the host or the host's children or the place itself. And I don't have answers, I just have the brain spinning right now. How will we enact that? You're muted again.
Yeah, perhaps not answers, but Aurora, do you have an example of where you made the effort as a geographer studying place, where you really tried to recognize that you were benefiting from that moment, and what was your reciprocity? How could you give back? And what is, as an example for others who are in the field?
Okay, I have, oh boy, okay, I have to change my virtual background since Uvalia reminded me of pictures. Okay, so as Kanaka, but also an academic, as someone of urban Honolulu, but having worked in rural parts of the islands, I am an outsider. I'm an outsider and insider. Outsider, insider, outsider. It's this strange space to live in, where I've had to be guarded of my energy because of people around me who don't, in my academic spheres, who don't engage in reciprocity and understanding power. And yet, when I am in community, I am the person with power. I have an academic degree. I am from, I speak a certain brand of English that my grandmother pounded into me that was based on a need to assimilate. So how did I engage in reciprocity? So this picture behind me, I had the privilege of working in Puanui in the community of, well, in the Mokua Kohala, the district, and North Kohala in particular. It's a rural community that's been impacted by plantation legacies and displacement and, historical legacies. And we'll probably get into this in the future webinars of disease and population and sort of rural to urban movements, basically because of changing economics landscapes. So I came as a technician for a pretty well-known school. I'm a pretty well-known scientist working in a Kamehameha School's property. And my job was to help better understand, if you see the lines behind me, this remnant agricultural system that once fed thousands of people. And I was coming in as an intellectual, but I was also there as a Hawaiian. And I think the biggest thing that I had learned in the process was that, my job was to not come and save anyone. And my job was to be useful. And I had to figure out what skills and tools and connections I had that could be useful. And I ended up working at a public school with students who the teachers didn't love to work with. And because I was connected, because I had keys to the gate or the combinations to the gate, I had access to places. My job was to give those young men access to connections that had been severed through history, through, I'll just say that, like economic lack of opportunities, of the meth epidemic of the 90s. And my job was as an educator to help. I didn't fix everything, but I could give them access to people who would help them understand their role in the world. And I guess I'm hopeful that the geographers who come take that upon themselves, because I really value the tools and language that geography as a discipline has given me to understand power and history and space, and critically understand where we are. But I think in general, translating that from academic writing and journals to practice takes work, and it's not straightforward, and we fumble along. So I'm not sure if I answered that. But
You brilliant. You did so brilliantly, Aurora. Thank you very much. And to Gary and Rebecca, we were thinking about what site visits will be possible when the conference is occurring in April. And since you're in Honolulu, many of those will be on island, but for those members who have the opportunity to go to our neighbor islands, this area she's talking about is on the island of Hawaii, in an area called Puanui. The academic institution she was talking about was Stanford University, and famous ecologist Peter Vatusic, who was doing some research here and started to engage our community. It'd be an excellent site visit for your members. Now, so we've kind of heard from a host cultural point of view, kind of our values and worldview about being in place and the importance of reciprocity. So we turn now to the AAG and to Gary and Rebecca and say, so why are you coming? Who are you? What's your intention? Help us understand who you are, so that we might feed your spirit, and you might reciprocate. So Gary, Rebecca, whoever wishes to start.
Can I start, Rebecca? Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for this conversation. Yeah, who are we? We are right now a little over 9,000 geographers covering many disciplines. We've been doing conferences like this for more than 100 years. And geographers in some ways are like all academics. We're kind of brought up in this system to go to these conferences. What do we do there? We share our research, we learn, we teach, we network with each other. But one thing that's occurred to me as we've had these conversations together over the last few months is that we're very focused on our own community, just our community, and yet we go to these places. And can we challenge ourselves to extend that mindset that we have for each other to the place where we're a guest? Can we bring a humble learning mindset? Can we adopt a spirit of reciprocity, our responsibility to the community that we're visiting, and without pretending to have the answers, because I certainly don't have them, ask the question, like, is there a better path for academic tourism, given how frequently this all happens? And can AAG in its own way contribute to improving things at least just a little bit, and maybe if we can, spreading it to other academic societies along the way? So I think that's the challenge to us as members. I hope it embraces all the concepts that you've been mentioning and that I'm learning. I'm confident that our members will adopt this mindset, and this webinar is the kickoff that helps begin that engagement, or really early. It's the conference isn't until next April, and really it's like a journey that we take together, I hope, so that when we get there, that we can really embrace all the things that we're talking about here today.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, and I just building on what Gary said, it feels incredibly important to me to think about how we can put these ideas into practice. We'll be in Honolulu, most of us, for 5 days, so there's something very limited about that time span. So it feels to me like we need to do a lot of work in advance to be able to behave in a spirit of reciprocity and of giving back, right? So it feels to me like that learning is a huge part of it, but it also feels to me like there's a bunch of things in the normal conference practices that we can change. And that feels to me like a really constructive way forward. And I'm thinking of, for example, economic practices around the conference, right? Are there things we can do that give back directly economically to Kanaka communities? I think also about the intellectual content of the conference, and building themes into the conference that really center Kanaka history, issues around settler colonialism, military dispossession and violence, tourism as a kind of semi-colonial practice, all of these kinds of things, right? How do we pull these things into the conference so that we have a very different practice of being deeply engaged with community where we are? And so I guess my hope for this is that this conversation gets us started in trying to think about how we do that in a serious way, and what a new model would look like.
We think about that, new models and so forth, and sometimes when we see the problems around us, we think about in terms of, what do we need to know that we don't know? But in some cases, it's what knowledge do we need to revive, and what practices do we need to revive that actually have been there all the time? And I'm wondering, in the field of geography, I mean, doesn't your field exist to really examine and study and analyze our planet and all its systems, so that you can develop information so we can understand it better? And can you think of some practices and some wins of geography in the field and your membership that really, we've heard about the negative stories. It's been a tool of colonization and so forth. But what are the wins? What are the victories? What has the field helped us to understand? And rather than hold it within the field of academia or the profession or the academia, how do we get that knowledge to communities as a way to give back? So let's start with that. And can you think of analogs? You have maybe your ideas don't or examples don't come from Hawaii, but analogs that maybe come from other places where, yeah, we need to do something like that when we're here in Hawaii. Is that fumbling through that question, but please address it.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. So one of the things that AAG is starting to work on very actively is the idea of engaged scholarship that really works on reciprocal relations with communities where we do research. So we try to avoid the kind of extractive and in some ways violent practices of research in the past. And so there are many people that I could call out for this. I'll just point to two off the top of my head. One of them is Melanie Malone, who's a geographer working in Seattle, who works with community gardens run by communities of color in Seattle, helping them with answering the questions they have about the toxicity of the soil where they grow their food and trying to think of strategies for continuing the practices they want to continue around growing food and building community around that, given the soil they have access to and the environmental issues, environmental justice and racism issues that they're struggling with. Another person I would point to is my fabulous Brazilian colleague, Nubia Beret Armand, who works with communities in Rio de Janeiro on urban heat islands and building community knowledge around those kinds of climatology issues. But there are many examples within geography of people who do this work. Those were two that came immediately to mind. There's so many more, but that does feel to me like a set of for sure of ethics around how we interact with others that could be very useful moving forward.
So if we were using this webinar series as a little bit of a marketing opportunity, I'm sure those who attend the conference will hear more about those examples and more about those research since it'll be on the agenda of the conference. So stay tuned for that, members. Mahina, you want to respond to this? Thank you.
Yeah, can I give a local example? And actually, Ulalia was a part of this as well as you, Uncle Neil.
Awesome.
So when I co-founded Paipai He'eia, which is a 20-year-old plus nonprofit that is working to actively restore a traditional food system on the windward side of Oahu. I was the founding executive director, and essentially we had very early on had a lot of interest from visiting academics. Well, some of our UH Manoa academics and then visiting academics, to the point where it was just getting overwhelming because we were also trying to run K-12 place-based programs and conducting our own kind of in situ research and trying to actively again restore this beloved wahipana. So what we did, we created our own kind of process that was proactive to engage the kinds of researchers that we wanted to engage with. So what we did, instead of waiting kind of haphazardly for a quote unquote right fit researcher, we challenged ourselves to come up with our own research agenda. What are our essential questions that we want to pose that will help us better understand how this ecosystem functions, so that as we make management decisions, as we undergo restoration activities, as we undergo educational activities, that's informed by our practice, applied research, so to speak. And so once we created that our own kind of research agenda, then we created our own process, right? So when researchers came, like if you want to align with one of our primary research questions, and it aligns with your research, then great, let's have a next step conversation. And there's some other components, and Dr. Rosie Aligaro has really formalized this process. We have, there's a working engagement where researchers will provide X amount of hours to engage our mentees and our local interns from area place that we will be named as secondary, or in some cases, primary authors as well. That there will be some cost sharing and resource sharing for whatever, grant monies that are received. And also that they will, Disney researchers will participate in community work days to be a part of a community. We're not interested in just kind of like come in, do your research and then leave. We're really interested in building a longer term relationship. So those are some of the like lessons from the field. And there are others who've made this process so much more refined and very useful.
But Hey is a great example, and it's been one of the most gratifying, I think, experiences of our collective lives. There are a few of us here on this call that we've seen the progress over about a quarter of a century now. That's just unprecedented. And for our AAG members who are going to sign up for a future webinar series, I think on Friday, September 22nd, we'll have a webinar directed by Kavika Winter, who is the head of the National Estuarine Monument there, or organization there, as well as Rosie Allegado, who you just mentioned, who's doing some amazing research. So more to come on He'eia, but other members here, panelists, want to comment?
I want to jump in, Neil, and pick up on something Mahina talked about, and I want to sort of step into a space which is a little bit me. It's not exactly where we are right now, but I just want to caution us and bring us back to one of the comments that's in the Q&A, and this reciprocity and aloha. And as Mahina was talking and sharing, she thought she was speaking about the intentionality of the relationship. And aloha is relational. It's not transactional. And we can move quickly and say, let's offset our carbon. Let's make sure there's 4 site visits set up. Let's identify a percentage of something that will support XYZ. All those things are maikai. Those things are that drive and that push, where that's coming from is good. Thank you. That's a place in thinking that that we find in Hawaii is a good momentum and a good trajectory that we've seen from conferences and visitors that come. And I'm going to share another picture here. I want to challenge us to go a little slow and to work on the relational part also. So I'm sharing here, a picture of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature that chose to come to Hawaii in 2016. And the image of the lots of people that you see on the right-hand side there are many people that contributed to building this relationship with the IUCN and them coming to Hawaii. So I'm going to take a little bit of time, and my slides are a little bit out of order. Hang in there with me while I bounce around a little bit. But why was the International Union for Nature coming to Hawaii? Likely the same reason that the AAG is coming to Hawaii. Hawaii is experiencing a number of threats that the rest of the world is seeing. We're also designing very unique solutions. We're at the forefront of some of this movement of towards these solutions. And so, that brings people to this place. And it's also people want to come to Hawaii. Sometimes they don't know why, but it's because we have this long history of rising to the moment. And the time spent with IUCN in planning for the World Conservation Congress allowed us collectively to step back and think about why we're going to join into this relationship together. And really the concept of hulihia, this idea of change, that there is something that needs to be overturned. And certainly for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, it was at that crossroads of climate change and all that's happening to our world. It's also on the social side that we feel here now. There's a time and a need for us to change and to respond to what's happening in our world physically, but also to what's happening in our communities and in our society, and how we as a whole community are changing. And we got very disconnected during COVID and needing to work separately. And we're coming back and are craving a bit of the connection, and we're craving those relationships and being intentional about that. So I would just pause and say, with this, it's my ka'i where we're going, and let's see if we can have dialogue about and create opportunities. Hard when it's 9,000 people, but we can think about that to build, to be able to have some of those relationships with place, and to have folks really get to experience aloha. And you saw another word up on the slide, and I'm sure and malama, to really have all participants in some way be able to actually experience that. Very quickly, I'll just wrap up and share. I think her name was Inger. She was the head of IUCN when it came to Hawaii, and then she did a number of talks. People heard her talk at the UN afterwards, and she was talking about aloha at the UN for months after Congress was here. And she talked about the fact that she never stood in a circle holding hands with others so many times than she did when she came here for IUCN. And she talked about how that was uncomfortable, and yet it helped her to experience the place and to experience and to know aloha. And she carried that message, and she still carries that message. And many that came to IUCN that aren't used to some of our practices, listening to people stand in a circle, somebody's going to oli, they're going to connect you to place, they're going to connect you to each other, and they're going to try and build that relationship. So I just want to share that I think there's this really great opportunity for that relationship building and that experience of aloha, malama, and so many others of these ways in which we approach each other in the world that will make this a really unique opportunity, and also help us level up what we see with IUCN. It helped us level up our expectations of guest and engagement. This is another opportunity to recognize there's great foundation, and there's still so much more we can do, and we can level up for this place, for our communities, and for those that come to Hawaii.
Thank you so much, Ulalia. And yes, indeed, that 2016 IUCN was an amazing experience here in Hawaii. I want to engage our, we're going to be a little bit linear about our questions and answers kind of coming at the end, but we've got really a couple questions that I'm seeing that really are on this point. So I want to raise them now and offer them from Heather Castleton. When I was recently in Hawaii for a research visit, I was able to contribute to First Saturday at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, doing land-based restoration as a way of giving back, reciprocity for my time there. Is this or something like it something we can do to give back to the land while we are there for AAG? Thank you. And in a related, an analog, Paul Kelly says, when I went to a Denver AAG conference, I joined with several other UNL students after the conference to drive down to a village in New Mexico, participate in their annual irrigation ditch clearing. There was a wonderful big homemade spread for lunch and time to learn and listen and socialize. Setting aside time for volunteer or event participation in lieu of the usual field trip seems like a possibility here. So toss those out for response by the group. Maybe Gary or Rebecca first as to adding on to that and what you're planning. And you and I are talking about, Gary, you and I are talking about what some of these opportunities might be, but also what's worked in other venues like Denver that you might want to look for as opportunities here.
So I will just say briefly that we really want the field trips here to connect to the kind of centering themes of the conference. And for sure, environment is going, and kind of thinking about environmental repair and relation is going to be one of them. The one thing that I want to be sure we don't do is kind of overburden or overwhelm local groups by, you know, showing up en masse without a real idea of what we're doing. So it feels to me like, yes, absolutely, that's the spirit I would hope to see in our field trips. And then the question that I hope we'll work through is how to do that well in a way that actually does work in a spirit of reciprocity as opposed to a spirit of burdening.
Thank you. Mahina, on the other side of that, you've already referenced a little bit about back in the day with He'e'eo and Pai Pai. How might guests engage in a way that's really manageable as well as reciprocal?
Yes, so relational and reciprocal. I'm going to share my screen shortly, but yes, so I think you're very much on point, Rebecca. I think it's best when you can take a look at, you know, the inventory of different nonprofit groups, community groups that already have ongoing community work days in place. It can get burdensome when you're asking for a one-off, right? Something out of their cycle. Do think about your vehicular footprint. A lot of our community work, restoration work, takes place in, you know, in neighborhoods, right? So we're very sensitive to our neighbors and we want to be good neighbors. So, you know, smaller vans better than the large buses, right? And that can be a little bit overwhelming. And I think, you know, in the spirit of reciprocity and of relationships, as both Aurora and Ulalia underscore, is encouraging folks when you come up with your list of possible huaka'i field trips, or I don't even call them field trips, I would say land engagement, ʻāina engagement. Do connect with your host earlier on, perhaps over Zoom, and have a conversation, start to build a relationship before you actually come to the place. So now I'm going to share screen, and Ulalia, please jump in. So Ulalia and myself, and then actually one of your peer geographers. I'm not sure if he's an AAG member. I think he is, Gary, but Dr. Kumana Beamer is also a co-founder of ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures. So hold on, I'm just going to share screen. I'm just going to walk through 3 particular tools. Okay, so the first is we have this initiative, a movement. Well, I'll call it a movement, and it's called ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures. We have it was basically a 4-step process. Again, it was birthed out of our frustration, really feeling left out of a very important conversation. You know, what would the post-pandemic economy look like for Hawaii? And so essentially what we did is we came together and started to envision, well, what is the healthy, abundant, prosperous, just economic future that we desire, not only for Kanaka Maoli, but all people who come to Hawaii and have made and accept their kuleana, their responsibility to Hawaii as a beloved home. And so we really centered our early conversations and our ongoing effort to pivot and transform our current you know, economy to something that's more circular and more indigenous grounded and value-based. So we center ourselves around 4 guiding principles. I'm not going to go through all of them at this point, and I will, you know, drop links or follow up with your colleagues, and perhaps links can be shared. I'm going to stop sharing and add another, share with you another tool that I think, 2 more tools that I think will be also very informative and useful. The next is called the Huliel Action Agenda. So once we articulated the values for which we wanted to undergo ongoing conversations to dismantle the current economic extractive paradigm, and then now start to rebuild an Hawaii-based economy that is again grounded in ancestral values. We then needed to then take it down to a more operational level, and then articulate. Uncle Neil Hannes was one of our facilitators and thought partners in this, and we created an action agenda. This word hulikia, which is related to huliao, is essentially transformation, the time for transformation. Yeah, discarding the old mindset, behaviors, models that no longer serve the long-term health and vitality of our ecosystems, of our island Earth, and therefore our people. And so we basically crystallize around our 4 major values, and then with community input all along the way, we have some very punchy statements, and we further describe what we mean and have actionable objectives per value area. So I'll just I'll just read out a couple. We affirm in ʻāina Aloha, we affirm that Native Hawaiian culture and perspectives are strength in rebuilding a resilient Hawaii. For example, place a top priority the well-being of our ʻāina water resources, oceans, skies, and the biodiversity integral to these, recognizing the long-held understanding that the ʻāina is our ali'i, is our chief, that our island is our chief, and we are its servant. Some other points here, assert collective responsibility, kuleana, to restore degraded environments, sustainably manage human-occupied spaces, and protect the vibrancy of intact ecosystems. Number 6, address historical and current injustices against Oiwi Hawaii, Native peoples of Hawaii, including water rights and issues related to historical ho'āina or land tenant rights. So I'm going to show you, stop share and then share one other tool that I think is going to have, great application. Ulili, I'm going to share the assessment tool. Can I punt it to you? I'll just put it up and maybe you could share that, describe that. Thank you.
Sure thing. Mahalo, Mahina, for sharing this. And we can, I'm sure I see the links coming up, and this can be shared in the links. And the origins and genealogy are important in Hawaii. And so building in, so just a side note, building in space and time for people to share background and origins. That's part of that relationship building in an island community. Figuring out how you're connected to somebody or building those connections is really important. So we can talk a little bit more about kind of the fun ways we do that in Hawaii, but a little bit of this origin story. Those of us that were involved in ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures, AAEF, many of us have spent time with Neil Hannes over the decades, and have been a part of elevating our consciousness and our way of thinking in the way we interact with the place that we live, the communities that we live in, and the goals that we want to achieve and accomplish. What is that outcome? What's that vision? That North Star that we have and that we hold for this place. And that vision is really held. You see me with pictures of old people and old words. That vision really is ancient, and it is progressive and future. So in this work that several of us have been doing for decades and working with Neil, there are earlier versions of this assessment. And as we were, as a part of AAEF, thinking about how could we help our community think about the impacts of their actions, and also think about the opportunities they have in order to move us towards that positive direction and that future. Maybe a tool that we had developed and utilized in other ways could have value here. And so we really have developed a way of thinking. It's a tool to spark dialogue. It's a tool for people to sit down and to think about what are the things that we want to try and accomplish together, or what is the vision that we hold for the future. And so I'm going to start on the left side of this table that we see up on the shared screen. We want a vibrant Hawaii. We want there to be vibrancy and integrity in our ecosystems, in our natural resources. We want to make sure that our native flora and fauna are thriving. That's one of the outcomes that we have. We want to positively impact our community, our well-being, the equity in our community, our ability to feel empowered and capacity and have autonomy. So on the left-hand side, we have a number of those types of the vision of a future that we hold. We have a Hawaii where our cultural vitality is thriving, where our ancestors and the knowledge of our ancestors is informing us, and also the work that we're doing is placing us in the place of becoming good ancestors for those that come after us. And then across in the colors, as you see across the assessment, we take a look at our action and we say, is what we're doing moving us towards this future, or is it moving us away from the future? And how much of our actions is it really a leading action that is really focused on improving the fertility and the integrity of our environment? And it's also supporting others to engage in similar efforts, or compounding that impact. Or as what we're doing, it's not going to help it too much, and it's also not going to cause harm. And we know that so much about what's happened in history has caused harm. So sometimes just not causing harm is something. And then we can take a look and say, you know, is what we're doing causing harm? And you can do this as a conversation and fill this out, and it provides, you can get a score there. It's one of those, you know, you guys have all these fancy score, and you can take a look at the end and say, of these things that we're doing, do we feel we're moving in the right direction? Are we moving away? Are there parts of this that help us move towards it? Or are there parts of our action and our work that is not helpful and moving us in that direction? So I'm going to pause there and check in with Mahina. And this tool has been used by a number of different individuals. Some have used it as they were thinking about inviting people to be a part of a marketplace, a community marketplace. It's been used by a very large watershed initiative, the Aloha Watershed Partnership, which is the watershed that encompasses Waikiki, which might be where your conference is considering being. But many different organizations took a look at this assessment and applied it to the plans that they had for the future. And they were thinking, are our actions gonna move us towards ʻāina aloha and this vibrant future that we hold?
Well,
And in addition, oh, sorry, but every county, we have 4 counties in the state of Hawaii has adopted, and they've been using it for all kinds of things, whether it be housing proposals, energy proposals, all kinds of things. So yeah, there is a lot of utility, and you make it, you bring the value to it, right?
I wanted to thank you for sharing these links and giving us these giving the membership opportunities to examine them more closely at their own leisure. I wanted to commend you for the development of this and how far it's advanced since we first sat down, Mahina. And I also want to suggest that maybe it's a part of reciprocity for the AAG members, if they were to dive into this and use it to really help give feedback on how to improve it, and to discuss with us where it fell short or and where it was really strong and it was a useful and effective tool. Like so many things in life, I mean, you see some numbers there, +2, +0, +8, and so forth. And correct me if I'm wrong, but those are not absolute, right? I mean, those are really the opportunity to have a discussion about that to help us understand the difference between incremental impact and transformative impact, or what's most important to us. So don't get hung up on any specific, we're not trying to solve an equation to an exact number. We're really supposed to have trying to prompt discussion about what's really going to make a difference. Am I right in that? See, heads nod. I'm struggling to kind of keep up with the questions and the comments in the chat and this really wonderful discussion. And I just want to go through some of those while we have some time now. To AAG reps, is this webinar series mandatory for members who wish to go to the conference? How will we ensure that everyone enters with the same understanding and history? So it's been a really useful conversation, Gary and Rebecca. How will you kind of drive people to who aren't participating today, aren't among the 200 people online today, but will be among the 6,000 participants?
Yeah, great questions. And with your permission, Neil, I might try to answer a couple of the other related
Fabulous
questions in the thread, if that's all right. Yeah, so I don't think we're going to make it mandatory. However, we're going to do a lot of promotion, not only of this kind of lead off webinar, but also the ones that come after it. We're also going to build a resource hub to answer the questions, several questions about all the really great links, like the ʻāina Aloha framework and everything else. We're capturing everything in the chat. We're going to build that. We're going to keep adding to it, have that be sort of a community built project so it can improve over time. And working with the local committee to figure out the best way to do some of these opportunities to volunteer, but not to overwhelm, but to do that the right way. So we're very much in a mindset of trying to gather ideas and models for how to do this right. So the examples from the IUCN and others in the chat, like we're really eager to understand what's worked and do everything we can to model that. So we are fully accepting our responsibility in all this, and we will do our very best to be good guests and also to ensure that our participants actually have the materials and resources so that they can participate in the same way.
Thank you. Rebecca, do you have more to add?
Nope. I feel like what Gary said matches my understanding. Well, actually, I want to say one more thing, which is that I feel like, we're going to try very hard to get people to engage in the run up to the conference, but I think also our goal is to make it pretty difficult to attend the conference without thinking about Kanaka issues and history and concerns and victories, because it's going to be the major events at the conference where we're hopefully working with the different specialty groups and sections who want to do this. We don't have the right to tell anyone to do something, but we will work with those that are excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot to help bring in keynotes and events that really center all these issues. So no, it's not mandatory, but I'm hopeful that it will be very difficult to avoid.
And I think, believe me, the people that you see here, as well as the people who are upcoming, are worth the time. I mean, they're amazing resources are being made available to your membership. But maybe some people are thinking they're not going because they can't afford it. And we have a question here from Rebecca. How might the AAG conference be made more financially accessible to Native and local Hawaiians, especially those who are working in nonprofits and community spaces? So could be people are tuning out or not tuning in because they've kind of written it off as unaffordable. Are you doing anything in regard to this need?
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. So we're going to make it free to those groups to attend. We did the same thing in Denver. We're committed to doing it going forward in all the cities. And so we're definitely going to do that. I just want to acknowledge another thing that hasn't come up too explicitly is the carbon footprint involved in the far travel. And we know many of our members are concerned about that. We're exploring ways to help engage in good restoration. We're not going to do carbon offsets. We know how troublesome those are, but yet we may be able to engage in good projects that may involve personal labor, but also financial assistance and things like that. So look for more things along those lines. We have several years ago committed to measuring our carbon for every meeting, and we have a goal of a 45% reduction relative to our 2010 meeting by 2030. So we're measuring it. We know this year is going to be bigger, so we're going to look for meaningful ways to try to counter that carbon footprint.
I think Ulalia said it quite well, that the important thing here is the relational connection, but transactions are important too. And to have your group 6,000 people throw Genki balls into the Aloha to help with that cleanup, or to clean up a beach, or to go to a site and do some major restorative work, would be quite meaningful to our folks, as well as, you know, doing things that offset their carbon the footprint for even getting here. So we're working on that. I want to assure the members that Gary's team and I've been in discussion, and we invite anybody who's participating in this conference today, either as a panelist or an audience, give us ideas. The organization is quite open to those. We have Aloha in his own language, her own language, from Kirsten Gao of Scotland. An islander first and an islands researcher second, and I welcome this approach being taken by AG. So there's support for what we're doing. It's our first conference. Strongly believe in building relationships. Will there be an opportunity for us to connect with people in Hawaii before we come beyond these sessions? It's a big conference, only 5 days. I'm keen to make the most of the opportunity to learn and share. So we have thoughts about that, how we can connect people beyond the webinars to Hawaii. Let's open that up to the group. Gary and Rebecca may not have thought about that, but Ulalia, Aurora. And Aurora, I meant to go back to you on how we're going to get the word out to our potential attendees at the conference that's tuition free. You might want to address that as well, and also this question.
So I'm in touch with, I guess, some of the local organizing capacity just through my department. And, you know, the semester people are 9-month appointees, they're not back yet. But there has been discussion among grad students, among faculty on other campuses about the issue, and maybe being able to liaise. I'm thinking about a question that got answered already, but Alita Cantor, who has worked in Hawaii, mentioned the specialty groups are already organizing, and I've seen student leads. So I think there's going to be important AAG side capacity there to have the different subgroups identify appropriate field trips and approaches and start that early dialogue. ʻāina engagements. And then on the kind of local access to the meeting, I think those conversations have started. They haven't developed it yet, but it is, there are existing networks that to do sort of outreach and make awareness happen. And so I don't know if there's a process, Gary or Rebecca, but there will be.
Or for those of us less familiar with AAG, can you give us examples, or Gary and Rebecca as well, of specialty groups? What are they and what do they do?
So specialty groups are like academic subfields. So hydrology or political geography or tourism. So they're groups for people that study particular things together. And they make a lot of the decisions about who are the speakers they invite, what are the sessions they highlight, and things along those lines. They have a lot of autonomy. So one of our goals is really to work with them to help them, if they want, find field trips and or actually, sorry, I want to go back to not the field trips. I'm losing the land engagement. Excuse me, Mahina. To try to really change the focus of this meeting. So AAG in the past has done this very typical academic disciplinary association thing where you land in a place, you might, go to bars and see it a little bit, but mostly you're in the room talking to each other, right? To try to instead say, okay, what would it mean to actually create a locally engaged, justice-focused way of engaging with the communities we visit? So yes. But working with the specialty groups is going to be a crucial part of this, of really making this meeting work and this model work. And I want to just do a quick shout out to Kate Derrickson and others who've been pushing for years to try to get free registration for community partners. So people who are not academics. So glad that this is something that's shifting.
Thank you. Aurora, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add, actually, I think I'd seen the assessment tool, but I think that's actually, right now I'm in syllabus rubric land, and I'm thinking it's an excellent rubric for applying, for helping each group consider their activity from meetings to ʻāina engagements and evaluate it and think about the things they hadn't considered in their calculation and design of events. So
Thank you. We had a suggestion, very familiar and beloved name. Dr. Manulani Aluli-Meyer gave an incredible keynote speech at the Hawaii Conservation Conference on many of these topics. Did anyone of the webinar attend HCC, and should AAG reach out to conference coordinators to brainstorm and share ideas on how to incorporate these practices into the conference like HCC did? So yeah, we have some amazing and gifted or people who can speak to issues in a keynote setting or at the conferences. So in addition to the webinars, not the least of whom are the three panelists here, but whether it's Manu or whether it's Kamala Beamer or whether it's Nainoa Thompson and others that I could name, how will the conference be planned to really engage these themes and these potential speakers? And what can we do to reach out to them?
I was typing in here, Neil, and I'll finish typing up. You know, I've been involved with the Hawaii Conservation Conference for the better part of 2 decades, and was there in the room when Dr. Manulani Meyer gave that incredible presentation. There's also a very incredible presentation by Kavika Winter and some folks from Kauai. And hopefully some of these recordings, I was gonna say some of these recordings would be up. What I will say is Hawaii Conservation Conference has evolved tremendously in the past 20 years. And I think talking with participants who have gone, and also Emma Anders and others, she's their executive director, and I think would be happy to share some of their journey that they've been on, to just see that evolution even within Hawaii with the conference, and also to talk about the different ways that they have engaged with the community. At Hawaii Conservation Conference, they also try to create an afternoon that's usually considered a community afternoon, where anybody in the community can come and come to like kind of a more open space where there are poster sessions or some of the vendors, so that people from the community can come and experience a bit of the conference. They also, they don't usually give away free registration, but there usually are various ways for different groups like students or others to volunteer. And so community members also volunteer in various roles, and in exchange for that have the opportunity to participate for the day, etc. And so they've got a lot of great stuff, but happy to make that connection, or others on this call can too.
You know, something that the HCC does, and it's so important in our community these days, is really emerging as a powerful way to educate, is they allow vendors, and you mentioned that. And the vendors are not just selling commodities. In some cases, the vendors are conveying story. They're conveying content about our culture, about our place, the very same things that geographers would research. So whether that's in a shirt, like this is a shirt for our monument, our marine monument, or in music, or in jewelry, or in anything else that might be sold, you have opportunities to really understand culture and be educated about culture. Mahina, I see you're off mute, so you have some thoughts to add either about that or about your own.
Just props to Ulalia in particular and her leadership to really, she's being very modest about it, but she and her peers have worked diligently to transform HCC. I'll use that word, transform again. And here's the reason why. One of the critical pivots that they've made is that they have elevated ancestral Hawaiian knowledge as knowledge that is valid, that is important, that is relevant, not only for today, but for, you know, for everything that we're facing as humanity, as human race. And because of that ongoing work, they are, I think, in ways encouraging, and in other ways, you know, somewhat prodding and poking others to to follow suit, because it's been proven that we can have multiple knowledge systems, we can have academics, we can have on the ground cultural knowledge bearers, right? Working hand in hand together for the betterment, for the good, for the health of our ʻāina. And that is what I would like to encourage all of you to see how might you adapt some of those approaches. And then the second thing I'll say is, you know, I like to be as generous as I can. We are, the three of us or four of us here, Kanaka, are very wealthy in our relationships and our connections. And so I feel like I want to extend, you know, invitations to meet certain, I'll call them Kanaka ancestral geographers. I mean, mind-blowing knowledge and wisdom that the folks have, where they know intimately of a very, you know, of microclimate and the change that's how to affect. I mean, they know their environment. However, I will say this, and this is just a little bit of just for introspection. I'm not sure if I would actually make that invitation, because I feel some level of camaraderie with you, Gary, and you, Rebecca. However, I'm not sure what is your process. You know, I would have to do a little bit of gatekeeping, right? Because we do need to protect the time and expertise of these knowledge protectors and knowledge bearers. And so I want to offer, you know, and extend to, you know, these brilliant individuals, because I think it would be such an interesting exchange. But then I don't know what is going to be, you know, the accountability factor after that. So I just leave that for further conversation.
Gary, would you like to address that now in any form?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for those thoughts, and you know, all these opportunities from our point of view are so important. We're gathering everything in the chat, and I'm going to go back and listen to all these things. I think in terms of your question about process, Mahina, like we're working really hard not to like come in hard with where we already have the full process, and that's why it's so important to work with you all and Neil and really get your guidance each step of the way, so that we get this right, because it seems like there's lots of ways to get it wrong, even if it's well-meaning, and we are determined to get this right. So we're really look forward to talking to you more about how we could do that in ways that would make you feel comfortable to bring some of those connections that you have, and make sure that we really put on the best conference we possibly could.
I'm wondering if a starting point for that would be for you to identify those specialty groups that you have. Then we can kind of look at those and think of local organizations or individual resources that might connect well. And then we can have that talk. We can put a face on your specialty group to kind of understand who they are, what they do, and see if we can't create relationship first before we have the engagement. That may be a way to proceed on this. We've got 6 minutes left. The time is flying. And we actually, a couple of those we want to hold for a close, but I want to honor the contributors in the chat. Paul Kelly, wondering if there are simple kinds of appropriate reminding, engaging rituals that conference goers can participate in individually or in small or large groups on site to help regularly take us into a different kind of place mentally. Oh, that's reminiscent of our Pico. We usually have a centering activity, and Ulalia, Mahina, you want to speak to that issue and whether that might be a thought that the conferees might, you know, usually the gavel pounds in the early morning and we call our meeting to order, but there's other things that we could do as well. Ulalia, you want to, or any of you want to speak to that?
I'll share quickly. Certainly, when coming together and gathering, as Neil said, we collect in a circle and set intention together. and become a collective, become that unifying body as we all show up with a particular purpose and a vision for the day and how we intend to move forward. We also utilize it a lot in our community at the closing of things. It was a practice when I was growing up, where we would sing a song, especially Hawaii Aloha. And we do that at the Hawaii Conservation Conference now. We usually sing all the verses of Hawaii Aloha. Our musicians this year did not know the other two verses, and you saw all of the regular participants standing there sort of like, oh no, what's gonna happen? We're not singing all of our verses. But it might seem trivial, but that song really speaks to our deep connection to this place and our relation to this place. It says, "Mau ke aloha no Hawaii," forever is our aloha for this place. But that standing in circle, there's research that talks about what happens when you stand and you hold somebody else's hand. There's also research that talks about when you stand with somebody and your breathing starts to come into rhythm with them. And if you sing or you vocalize, you chant with others together, there is actually a physiological change that happens to us in that collective. And that's something that is quite common for us in Hawaii. And we hope that it is something that perpetuates for a long time to come. And it really is about us becoming kako and recognizing the shared intentions that we have for place. This place will be better because we share in a vision of abundance and care for each other. And that's what we reaffirm, whether at the beginning, whether at the end, or at any other time.
Maybe just to add on that,
Mahalo.
just
Please.
to add quickly, like one of the fun things that could be done at pretty low cost, it would be an opportunity to contract a, Kanaka creative person, maybe a 30-second to 1 minute kind of meditation that's grounded in our ways, right? Just breathing and centering around a few keywords, just pre-recorded. Something can be done at, at your leisure independently, while maybe in your room or breakfast, whatever, and then you maybe even perhaps something for the closing day. It's something that is important to us. We greet Papa Kanehoalani, grandfather's son, and we also say adieu at the evening. And so, yeah, those are some easy things that can be done, and also, provide just flexibility, right? People can engage in that when appropriate for them.
Thank you. In our last couple of minutes, I guess we could follow through with further discussion on these, Gary and Rebecca, as to how go about this. There's a discussion from Francis Fahey, I believe, about engaging children and young people of all ages in the nature of this work, and will there be such opportunities created through the conference? If we do it here, then it's an idea for them to take back to wherever they go as to how to engage that next generation in the work that not only to become professional geographers, but really in the understanding the issues that face the planet in which they will live. You have a plan for that, or do you typically engage in that, or is that something we can inaugurate here?
It sounds like a new idea to me. Staff will correct me if that's wrong, but one thing that occurs to me is that we have to offer in this is that we have all the space in the conference center for the 5 days. We have and a lot of space at the Hilton during the whole 5 days. And so, like, getting creative with how to use that and engage the community by making that available for free and thinking outside the box for how to do things, just like the audience member suggested, is exactly what we're looking for to think about.
Very good.
Yeah,
So,
can I just say quickly, I was just at a workshop in Mexico City where part of our role was to work with local high school students in environmental science, and it was totally fabulous. And I think if we can find ways to do that makes sense from Hawaiian points of view, that would be wonderful.
Very excellent. So our time is coming to a close. We have a few more comments, and yes, people can email any of us here, I think, but especially me, Gary, and Rebecca, ideas they have or things they want to follow up on, and we'll do our best to address those either in webinars or in other kinds of relationship building or at the conference itself. Vendors, yes, we'll try and get some information out about those vendors and so forth, and we have an interest of the Caribbean geography specialty group, some of the things they're interested in. So we're capturing all this chat, but unfortunately our time has come to conclude this webinar series, the first webinar, not the series. But I just want to say how grateful I am to this panel for really being an outstanding ambassadors and representatives of our Hawaiian culture. Thank you, Ulalia, Mahina, and Aurora. Thank you, Gary and Rebecca and the AAG team for really paying attention to your membership and what they're saying and deciding to make this choice to be engaged with our host culture here. And thank you for engaging me as part of this process. It's an honor. And to all those who tuned in today or who are tuning in the future, as this webinar gets posted to the website and you could view it at your leisure, we thank you for your interest in Hawaiian and our culture. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Gary. Stay tuned. Next, I guess last thing is next month. I believe it's August. I don't have the date, but sometime in August, we'll have an amazing session planned on the Kumulipo, our understanding of creation, led by representatives of Halau Ohia, Kekuhi Kanahele in particular, and her team. And it's going to rock your socks. It's going to be awesome.
Yes, we have a lot of good things to come. On behalf of AAG, I want to thank all four of you for your very moving words and examples and your generous spirit in giving us all these thoughts and ideas, and we will respond in kind, and we really look forward to partnering with you going forward. So thanks to all of you.
Mahalo nui, and to our audience, we wish you aloha, aloha hui ho, which means aloha until we see you again, and we hope we do see you again very soon, next month in August.